You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome back, listeners, to the SDSU podcast. I'm your host, Andre Hagberdian. We'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Paul Garrison. Hope every Aztec fan out there has had a great summer. I know you probably haven't heard from us much, at least from the podcast angle this summer. We put out some Mother's Day, Father's Day episodes that were great. Hopefully you guys listened to those. And then also an episode with Brendan Hill, the NIL coordinator at San Diego State. But other than that, it was a fairly quiet football content summer as the team was working on summer conditioning, but there was not a lot of activity in terms of transfers or, football to talk about. So as we're sitting here in the middle of August, we're about 2 weeks away from the opening game. We had FanFest scrimmage last weekend, which was attended by a couple thousand, maybe San Diego State fans. Fall camp practices are probably more than halfway through now, or about halfway as they prepare for a game in 2 weeks. Today's episode is centered around Aztec for Life with Ryan Lindley. Back in spring camp, we actually had a chance to talk to Ryan Lindley on an exclusive interview as part of our coaching interview series. If you listen to our podcast around spring camp, we put out multiple episodes with interviews with the assistant coaching staff at San Diego State, predominantly all the new ones that came into the program this year with Sean Lewis. We also talked to Ryan Lindley, but we had not put that interview out yet. Paul wrote an article about Ryan Lindley, about the interview, about 3 weeks ago, called Ryan Lindley Gives Sean Lewis Credibility. I suggest you guys go find that on eastvillagetimes.com. It was a great article kind of recapping Ryan Lindley's thoughts on, what he had seen from Sean Lewis as of that point, which was in the middle of spring camp. Just his thoughts about what the changing of the guard, per se, in San Diego State, going from Rocky Long, Brady Hoke to Sean Lewis. He obviously talks about his role. He came back to San Diego State halfway through the 2022 season as a quarterback's coach. He was promoted to offensive coordinator for the 2023 season. But obviously with a head coach coming in that's offensive minded, who's the play caller, who's the offensive coordinator, everyone wondered where Ryan Lindley fit in. He ended up becoming a senior offensive analyst for the team. He talks about that, what that means, what his role is. He's also supporting, Coach Barton, who is not just a special teams coordinator and the associate head coach, but also the tight ends coach. Those are all things that we discussed with Ryan. We also had a chance to hear from Ryan Lindley about a week or so ago in fall camp. Now, this one was more of a post-practice media scrum with several media members. EBT's Johnny Olivieri was on hand and recorded the interview, asked a few questions along with some other media members. So after we play the video of the interview Paul and I did with Coach Lindley back in the spring, we'll also play snippets of that post-practice interview from fall camp from a week ago. You can kind of see a lot of similarities, but you can also hear from Coach Lindley in terms of, how, the summer went and how fall camp is going, especially with the tight ends that he's helping with. One of the major things that happened in the coaching world between spring camp and fall camp was a change in rules. The Division I Council in June actually changed rules that made analysts and grad assistants able to do on-field coaching during practices and during games. That was somewhat outlawed prior to this change taking effect during the summer. And the change went into effect immediately in June, meaning moving forward, any staff member may provide technical and tactical instruction to student athletes during practice and competition. Coach Lindley talked about how he was helping out the tight ends in the spring, but he really wasn't able to do a lot of on-field instruction, and now he can. And so he's doing a little bit more of that. supporting the team. Analysts are still not allowed to do recruiting. There's still rules around how there's a limit of 10 coaches that can do recruiting, assistant coaches, in addition to the head coach. So I don't know how Sean Lewis is necessarily navigating that, but these are all things you could hear from Coach Lindley in both of the interviews. But I think it's nice to hear his perspective on how, things are a little bit different at San Diego State with a new coaching staff, but really not changing the fabric of what San Diego State football has been over the years. Let's get to the interview with Coach Lindley that Paul and I did in the spring, and then afterwards we'll play the post-practice interview with Coach Lindley that the media did about a week or so ago, and then I'll be back at the end to close it out. We want to welcome back Coach Ryan Lindley to the podcast. How you doing today, Coach?
Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you too. It's since the last time we spoke. Obviously, a lot has happened. Coaching change. Your role has changed. Of all the potential other opportunities that might have been out there, why was it important for you to stay at SDSU as a senior offensive analyst?
Well, I think first and foremost, this is home for me. As an alumni and obviously being from here too. So, San Diego's a tough place to leave. It's not that it's expensive when you're here and all that good stuff, but once you're back home, you feel great. You want to be a part of seeing these guys grow and have success, and become great young men. And I think that's what this program's done for a long time. And you never know in the transition. I really just for myself wanted to be open to whatever opportunity Coach Lewis would see me having, and obviously it's really worked out. I think hopefully on both ends, and I'm really happy to be a part of the staff. And he's just been, man, it's like every day I learn something new. And just for me on a personal note, like obviously I hope I'm bringing a ton to the table to the staff and to him and helping him out achieve our ultimate goals. But for me personally, man, I've learned a lot from him and the rest of the guys that have come on board.
When Sean Lewis was announced as the coach, what, if anything, did you know about him at that point? And then what have you learned over the last, 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a defensive analyst down at Mississippi State, I'd spend some of my downtime kind of looking at other offenses and doing some different stuff, knowing that, ideally I'd be back on the offensive side of the ball at some point. And they made a ton of noise. I mean, I haven't heard it down south. So I'd watch some of their stuff, check it out and see what they were doing. I knew second and third hand through a couple of people, some guys on staff there. So really just was a fan from afar. And obviously a ton of action and ton of attention around him last year at Colorado. So, other than just admiration, seeing what they did and the results that they had everywhere he's been, did not know a ton, so when he came in day one, just really wanted to come from a place of humility and letting him know that, hey, I'm an alum and want to do whatever I can for the program. And also within that, the humility of shoot, like I know he's done it at a high level. So would be excited to learn whatever I could from him, because it's been exciting to see our guys start to take hold of it. And we just finished up practice 6, and we still got plenty of growth to take place here until the fall. But it's been fun to see them take it on and get it working out on the field.
There's a lot of ties between, Rocky Long, Brady Hoke, and then Dino Babers, Sean Lewis coaching trees. Could you describe some of those similarities in terms of philosophy and player development?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing, and you hear Coach say it, and I think it's echoed throughout the staff at this point, is finding a way to be transformational in our relationships with the kids. I think so much and often, I think far too often today, that everything's transactional. What can you get me? What can I get from you? It's what we're trying to do, and I think what's been done for a long time with the success that's been had here on the Mesa is taking people and an old coordinator I had used to call it synergy of, make 1 + 1 more than 2, and I think that with what we do and how we're going to set ourselves apart is the people and the relationships that we have with our players, the relationships we have in this community. I think that's the one common ground you see of, yeah, there's some things philosophically that are changing, but at the same time, the bedrock of all of it, what makes you a winning program, what allows you to transform young men is all the same thing, caring about that individual and letting them see them realize their goals.
One recruit that we've talked to, who's been, on visits, things like that, he described Sean Lewis's offense as air raid like. more air raid like is what he described it. Kind of an expert on that. So I mean, are there elements of what Sean Lewis is doing to what Mike Leach did at Washington State and et cetera?
Yeah, no, I think like, you get into it, right? I guess like a layman's version, I guess any version of spread maybe gets the air raid tag on it. But I think really if you talk to coach, it all centers around Art Briles at Stephenville High School, and really that became the University of Houston to go all the way through it, and what he did there, Oklahoma. I mean, it really like there's a series of places where that traveled. And I think most notably what people would take from it is Baylor, actually back when I was in school, RG3 and all those, exciting receivers, what they were doing, spreading the field out. But the thing people didn't realize with that too was when they spread the field out, man, I actually played with the guy in the Senior Bowl. His name was Terrence Ganaway, and he was a 240-pound running back, and they spread the field out a ton. But that guy, man, he punished you when you ran the football too. So I think what we want to do and what we've really shown, I think, with some of the guys that we have already here on the team is like, man, we're going to spread it out. We got some guys to stretch the field and do some things and be exciting, but that physical nature of Aztec football is not leaving either. I think some people, and that's where I would also say like there's a little separation between the air raid of hey, it's spread it out, shred it, take it down the field. I think there's a lot of physicality to what Coach Lewis wants to do and bring to the table. So I'm really excited to see how balanced we're going to be. And at the end of the day, I think the one thing he harps on is we got to put our guys that give us the best chance to be exciting and explosive. We got to put the ball in their hands.
You mentioned before, hoping that you bring a lot to the table. We just talked to Zach Barton last week, shared the clip on social media. Not sure if you've seen it, but he said, quote, believe, I don't know where we'd be without him, meaning you. And it's, the fact that we know who you are, we've talked to you for years, we see your impact throughout the community. So that's not a surprise to any of us. But then in 3 months, you've been able to, gain that kind of respect with the people that you work with. I guess, what is your response to hearing something like that?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty nice of him to say. I think coming from a place where I'm learning a whole lot from him and seeing where I can kind of fit into the scheme. And he's coached that position at a high level and had some really good guys for Coach Lewis over at Kent. So just trying to learn from him a ton. I really appreciate him saying that. But I always think too that that this thing, I think we got so many strong individuals on the staff that there's a lot of guys we'd be hurting without. Him included, probably first and foremost being the associate head coach. But no, and to kind of go on down personally, yeah, like there was a point I really, we sat down and I said, hey, I don't want to be here just as an alum. I don't want to be the guy that had to hang on. If that's the case, there's gonna be no hard feelings. I'm gonna pull for the Aztecs if you want to cut me loose. So, I'm happy to be here. And like I said, I just want to make sure, with everything I've ever done in life, it ain't gonna be dead weight, so I'm excited to be on board and full steam ahead, getting this Aztec fast thing rolling and have something fun to watch in 2024.
And part of that he explained to us, and we've seen in practice, is you're working with the tight ends. I think even at the recruiting event, he didn't introduce the tight end recruits. You introduced the tight end recruits. And so what could you tell us a little bit about what's that's been like, being a quasi position coach for the tight ends?
Yeah, and obviously like the NCAA regulations where they're at right now, you kind of get handcuffed some, but I think as we looked at it, Coach Barton, as he said, like, wants to definitely get special teams off the ground and keep that as main focus. So where I can and kind of preparation for those guys, pick up some slack for them and keep an eye on those guys while he's taking a look at special teams. That's kind of where the fit's been so far, which is it's fun for me, because I think if you look at the position besides quarterback that's most involved in everything in the game, it's tight end. I mean, they gotta do everything in the run game and the pass game, and that's where I think you guys just talked to him. I lean on a guy who's one of my best friends and former teammates. Happy he's back on the Mesa, and Mike Schmidt of so much in the run game. He's obviously our run game coordinator by title, but I think even on a day-to-day, if there's something that I'm confused about or I want to make sure the tight ends are on board with, I go straight to him. He's kind of keeping this thing afloat and keeping me on the straight and narrow from that aspect. So it's been a lot of fun, and we got a great group, man. I mean, obviously some guys that have carried over that some people know. Logan Tanner's a guy who's a young guy that we're looking to continue to take some strides, and new guys that have come in the building and Jude Wolf, and Gabe Garrettson that like really, man, I think have hit the ground running. So it's been a lot of fun working with that group. You know, you don't get to probably be in depth with all the guys that you want to be when you're a coordinator in the past. So getting to kind of dive in and be really close to those guys has been a lot of fun.
Then you mentioned, being involved in everything. What does an ideal tight end do in Sean Lewis's offense?
Yeah, I think like it's the interesting thing is you look back like the evolution of the system that he's been in. I think it's really dependent on what that individual's traits are. I think he's had some guys in the past that are big time receivers. Obviously probably didn't bring as much in the run game, so they're almost a fourth wide out in there, spreading it out, getting tight sometimes, but really making some plays in the pass game. And then at times he's had a guy, that sometimes he's a sixth offensive lineman. You see some clips of a guy that they work with a guy that's kind of they transition. I think during COVID, everybody had to be a little strategic and be creative with how they use personnel. And it seemed like a couple of games they literally would take their sixth lineman and put them in there. So that's really right now with where all those guys at, and we really don't have a complete feel with it where everybody is and feeling out their strengths and weaknesses. That's the number one thing I think Jude's been bringing to the table right now is he's doing a good job all around. I think he's making plays in the pass game and showing that he's that big time high school recruit that he was and being explosive, moving down the field and making plays with his hands. But he's also not afraid to throw it up in there and use his length and be strong at the point of attack in the run game. So I'm really hammering on those guys to be everything because I think in reality too is, I want to make sure that if coach wants to do either one, right, run the ball or pass it, don't give him a reason that he has to take us off the field for either or, be that guy that can fill every gap there.
You mentioned obviously San Diego's home. We've spoken to a lot of San Diego high school football coaches in the last few months, and some of them have said flat out, before Ryan Lindley came back, we didn't see much of the offensive staff at San Diego State at practices or in the community. But since day one, since you came back, you've been very present. We've seen it on social media as well. How much of a focus is that still for you in your new role to be someone that could help bridge the gap, with San Diego recruits to the new staff?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I think, in the role I'm in right now, you take an auxiliary role, you're not on the road. So really in every, anything I guess I got a connection to, I just try to be a support system for all these guys handling their areas. And, obviously Mike Schmidt being back, he's a Madison High alum, him and Coach Sumler are really kind of taking on most of San Diego where, hey, I'll just be in to help him. Cause that's the thing too. I think, Demetrius Meach does an amazing job too. He's on these guys. He's got the pulse, and we always kind of joke now, especially with Mike being back, man. If something's going on, we don't know about it. That's gonna be a unique situation. We got just about every area of San Diego covered as far as where we're all from. So I think that's the key, and the reality is too like there's always going to be the guys that feel like they slipped away, and that's understandable too. I think everybody wants to push their guys and see their guys be successful. So as far as we go, I'm always going to look at it as, man, I take some pride in having been a former hometown hero of, those guys that show up and do have the opportunity and the responsibility to show up here and be that guy on campus. We make sure those guys come and get put in the best positions to be successful.
Coach, how did it work like before all of the present staff was announced, right? Because obviously they're working in Washington all the way to the end. Did that give you the opportunity to go and be out at schools and to kind of do that more full role? Or how did all of that work? Because you were one of the people, that obviously Andre said, but also from Coach Lewis, that he talked about being integral and being able to kind of really get that class of 2024, where it needed to be.
Yeah, I guess think of it like it's like you're like the 12th man or the sixth man off the bench. When we didn't have a full staff, I guess I could step in there and did it sometimes. Obviously, we've had some shuffling even after the initial staff came in. So yeah, I mean, and that obviously as a college coach and you keep kind of working your craft, that's kind of something you want to do and be out on the road and recruit and push for your guys and evaluate and do all that whole thing. So yeah, I mean, being able to do that, it's just the other thing of you're kind of, as an analyst, you're sitting there on the bench, and if your number's called, you're ready to go do it.
We couldn't have you on without asking you about quarterbacks, considering that was your position. There's two quarterbacks returning from last year that you worked with, Kyle and Javance. There's two new guys in Danny and AJ. From what have you seen from the competition? Obviously, we're not asking you to give away, who you think is going to be a starter, but like, what have you seen from those two new guys? And then what have you seen from Kyle and Javance in this new system?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is I've just been impressed, and for me, it's been a lot of fun too, just because Coach, Maddie played in it and played at a really high level. So, for me, in a lot of ways, it's good because I don't, I don't know the teaching of all this stuff and can kind of just be a spectator in that sense. But watching those guys learn it, and I think the one thing with all four of those guys we got rolling right now, like they all work at it, man. And like a prerequisite to the quarterback position is being that gym rat, being the guy in the film room, and really wanting to be around it. So when I look at it, I think I'm probably so busy trying to make sure I'm on par and coaching the tight ends up the way I can. But watching those guys, I can just tell, they're taking the steps forward, they're improving. And it's a lot of fun for me, just as obviously it's in me a little bit as a quarterback guy, hearing how Maddie and Coach Lewis teach it and see it and coach it in the system. Haven't done it for a long time, so that's been a lot of fun, been a treat for me, along with trying to make sure obviously I'm handling my business in the tight end room.
One more for me, Coach. We get 45 minutes to come and watch practice, and obviously it's usually just warm-ups and things like that. So it's tough to gain anything, which I know that's by design, right? Sure. Don't want to give anything away. That's no problem about that. I understand. But Leo Kemp, he looks like he's a tight end, maybe. And his hands seem pretty natural. Is that accurate? It looked like Nick Gardenera stayed at running back.
Sure.
Is that accurate?
we kind of split those guys, and it's like they're both just body type wise or kind of tweeners in the transition here. But it's funny because everything comes up. We watch old clips, of Coach Lewis's stuff at Kent, and there's a guy with I think the exact same number as Leo and a very similar body type. We always like to tell Leo when we watch the film that played a lot of football for him, and did a good job at the tight end position. So we felt like with what Leo did last year, that might be the transition to make sure he feels like he's got a fit in the system. And the greatest thing to me on a day-to-day basis is like you just see the kid's energy is wherever he fits in. I think like he's not going to have a problem being in the running back room, the tight end room, the linebacker room. He's a long snapper. I mean, like you look at Leo Kemp every day, and he's just the guy you want on your team. Coach Barton says it too, like just the energy, and you send him out there to do a job, and he's going to do it to the T how you want him to do it, and put his heart and soul in it. So yeah, Leo's been a lot of fun, like getting him, and there's been, I would say he's been putting the work in. So I said he'll probably appreciate you saying that, because we give him a hard time of obviously his catch radius is a little smaller than the other guys, but
that's true, yeah.
But man, he does a hell of a job, and he works at it. And that's I even made a joke the other day to all those guys in there. Actually, I think Leo's the only guy returning with a Division I touchdown reception. So he caught one there the last. So Leo's the leader in the clubhouse right now, and he'll hold it down. Hopefully someone passes him up here week 1 in the fall.
That's great.
Coach Lindley, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time with us as always. Look forward to being out there for the spring game, if not earlier, for some practices.
No doubt. Look forward to seeing you guys too. Appreciate it.
All right, have a good one.
Yep.
Tight ends coach, how that
I think really like talking to Coach Lewis, like I just wanted to help out wherever I could when this all started. So I'm not sure I could pinpoint an exact moment for you, but just kind of the way it shook out, and I think some of it too, obviously with Coach Barton's roles and responsibilities, doubling down. Really, it just started as kind of helping him out. I think just kind of taking it head on and being able to take some more off his plate than I think he anticipated. Being able to do some more, and obviously the rule changes. We're going to keep it above board too. So that helped out some, and obviously great for myself and great for the whole crew. But it's been awesome, man. I mean, I can't thank Coach Barton and Coach Lewis enough for the opportunity and everything they helped me out and get me rolling with these guys. And we got a great group of kids. Just talking to Mikey and talking to Jude throughout the summer.
Will you spend time on the field during games, or will you be in your original assignment up above?
I think we're still bumping through that. We've talked about just the way it works out. I think obviously with Coach Barton being the special teams guy, he'll probably be on the field, so potentially I'll be up in the booth. But those things still shake themselves out, so could be anywhere. And I've done both. I said coaching positions. I've been on the field and in the booth, so you kind of have different roles and responsibilities at that point. And obviously, if technology's working out all right, you can still talk to the guys who are on the sideline too, so it'll be okay.
Right, and spending time in the league, do you kind of know what they're expecting at that level. How does that contribute to what you're able to share with these kids?
Yeah, no, it's been great. I mean, I try to refer back for them a lot. I got to be around and throughout this summer, reached out to a lot of guys that I played with formerly, even a lot of former Aztecs. I mean, I've told those guys, like, I think that's the cool thing about really Logan Tanner's the only guy coming back that was here last year, but regardless of that, I think they're taking on and they're stepping into a room that has a lot of tradition here at San Diego State. So the Gavin Escobars, the Daniel Brunskills, David Wells is playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Carly Waring, the list goes on and on. I'll go all the way back to Rob Awald. I don't want to let him out either. So it's I let those guys know. We try to remind them. I try to remind them weekly in camp of, hey, this is a group that's had a lot of tradition, a lot of success here. So they got big shoes to fill, regardless of whatever situation, whatever they get asked, and they've done a pretty good job so far of stepping up to that challenge in camp.
You see the tight ends being more emphasized this year than maybe in the last decade or so?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I look and talking with Coach, I think he's been around varying levels of personnel efficiencies or surpluses in certain areas. So talking to him, I think it all works out of, like, by the end of camp, I've told those guys in the tight end room, hey, each one of you you're competing for every touch you can get or every opportunity you get, even if it's holding down a C-gap and blocking in the run game, doing what we can do. So I think, talking to Coach, the multiplicity of what, he's looking forward and he would love to do. Obviously, you want to keep the defenses on their toes, but I tell our guys we got to earn that each and every day. So, not only are they competing against each other in the room, but I kind of tell them, hey, you're competing against the other 10 guys on the field and the other skill players on the field. You got to show that obviously you're worth getting the ball put in your hands. And I think, we're real fortunate in there to have a couple of guys that are pretty dynamic and pretty athletic, and they've taken that head on, and I'm excited to let them cut it loose tomorrow.
How does your background as a quarterback help when you're teaching tight ends? I would think most coaches come from a different background.
Yeah, I've had a couple tight end coaches when I was in the league that were former quarterbacks, and like I reached out to them too. And the biggest thing I think is anytime as a tight end, like, and especially in what we're trying to do, where the guys are going to be hooked up in the box, they're going to be hipped up on a tackle, they're going to be on the line of scrimmage, and can be in as far as being all the way outside the numbers. So I think finding a way to teach everything we do conceptually, so that if things change, like, hey, on a dime and Mikey Harrison needs to go from playing inline tight end to being out split out or wide receiver, hey, like, we can teach those guys to think conceptually, allow them to learn. And, hey, it's not just I'm robotic, I'm in my job right here. Know where our piece fits into the entire puzzle. And then the biggest thing too, especially probably in the pass game for the most part, is like letting them know, like, hey, yeah, that may have felt good to us in our position at tight end of how we ran that route, but understand what this guy's feeling who's holding the football in the backfield, right? And like the ultimate goal is to make him feel confident about delivering it on time. So try to give them that perspective in everything I do. And I got to coach wide receivers when I was at the University of Utah, so kind of taking those parts of the pass game, and having Mike Schmidt here has been huge for me of some of the stuff in the run game that honestly at the beginning maybe I lacked in some ways. Leaning on him and leaning on Coach Lewis to kind of clean those things up for me has been really good.
Were linebackers the only position now that you have left to coach?
You know what? I kind of helped out there, but I don't. At this point, I remember Zach Arnett told me when I left Mississippi State 2 years ago, I ain't coming back to defense. They ain't let me back on the dark side, so I'm done there.
Go ahead.
Having played here, what is that top piece of advice you see yourself giving these athletes during the off season?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing, and it's really cool how our room is worked out. We got a really young group of guys, and then you have, Mikey and Jude who are here really, they're here for 6 months. They're here to play one last final football season, get the most out of their opportunities playing college football. And the biggest thing I tell them is to use Mikey and Jude as an example. They are where they're at, and they may have 3 more training camps, 4 more training camps, but like, hey, all that, and Jude's a phenomenal example if you know his backstory. I mean, hey, he was a big time guy at SC, and would kind of put it together, and one thing, whether there's an injury or something else, would keep him from getting on the field. So I use that for those guys to let them know, like, hey, everything you do while you're here on the Mesa, you gotta take every opportunity, every rep, every practice, and use it to the fullest, take advantage of it, because it can be gone for you in a blink. So that's kind of for Logan, especially a guy like that. I mean, he's been here for 3 years, and it's like that tight end room's turned over 3 different times while he's been here. So I think he's a guy that's definitely taken that to heart, and I've been really proud of him of how I've seen, at least in the year and a half that I've been here, how he's grown and matured and really taken a lot on this year.
Maybe it's by design that we're still trying to figure out what this offense would look like, but with you being relatively new to it, but obviously more than we are, how would you describe what we're eventually going to see August 31st?
I mean, the obvious, right, is fast. We're gonna go fast, and I think with the tempo is putting pressure on the defense is where that all comes from. But I think we're going to be fast. We're going to use every blade of grass, and I know I'm probably mimicking some stuff that you probably heard 15 minutes ago. But
Anything new you want to reveal? To
no,
us
and I would say, and I'm all about, hey, there's a beauty to, especially since I'm new to it, man. I mean, I think the possibilities are kind of wide open for us, But I think at the end of the day, the fun part to listen, and really even for me, just as an offensive mind, listen and learn from Coach Lewis, is that he's also got a wide background, So as much as some of the Kent State stuff you see in 10 personnel and spreading it all out. Well, he also played tight end at Wisconsin, and as he'll say, mama is power, So we're still gonna lean on people. And Mike Schmidt's here from the 22 personnel days with the all-time leading rusher not too long ago. So I think the beauty of that is, I'm gonna keep the poker face on like everybody else, and we can see it all by the end of the season. So I think we're locked in and we're here, and our kids also are here. They're here to win games. Nobody's here just to catch 100 balls or do this or that. Like, we're here to put points on the board and win games on offense, and that's what I hope you guys will see in about a month here.
Is there any appreciable tight end position in this offense? Is it more traditional than ones
I think the great thing, specifically talking about Mikey and Jude, the older guys, is I think anytime you can have a guy with so much the multiple dimensions to him, to have a guy that on any given play call, you put Jude out there, you put Mikey out there, the book's open for Coach. I think if there's only one guy out there, sometimes if you're in a 12 personnel outfit or a 13 personnel outfit, there's one guy that kind of has one superpower or one trick in his bag. So if he's out there as the only tight end, you're a little bit limited in what you want to call. So I think any time when we're on the recruiting trail, and Coach Barton's been like, you want to get a guy that can do everything. You don't want to kind of hamstring or handcuff your coach when he's calling plays. So that's the fun thing, I think, about those first two guys. And then even I mentioned Logan Tanner. Gabe Garrettson's a guy that's had a phenomenal camp. He had a great spring coming in here from Butte. It's each one of our guys kind of gives something, brings something to the table that allows Coach to kind of dig into that bag and pull out a trick or two.
So they gotta love busting somebody, a linebacker, as well as busting them out of route.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I've told those guys, physicality and toughness. That's effort. That's going to be a non-negotiable for us. So I think those are things we can control, right? Like attitude. We have to have a baseline, and that's where I hit on kind of David Wells is a guy, for an example. We talked about him the other day. If you look at David Wells' stat line, okay, I think he caught 46 balls while he was here in 52 games and 6 touchdowns. Well, hey, he also won 40 out of the 50 games that he played in. He's got 2 conference championships, 3 10-plus win seasons, and that's the stuff that made David Wells a pro. That's why David Wells is going into his 8th year in the NFL, okay, making close to $1 million this year. That's what I told those guys. I'm not sure what his NFL stat line is, but I'm sure it's not too great either, but he's still out there doing it. And I've told those guys, you find your niche, hence why I said, hey, you work for every opportunity we get. Whatever Coach wants us to do, we're going to go out there, be unselfless, and just work our butts off to get that done. So obviously I say, it's still, the sexy stuff is running around, catching the football, being out in space. So the guys that can do that, that's a plus. But I'm always going to tell them the foundation is having grit, playing with low pads, and fitting your hands up on people for sure.
Your QB will love you for that too.
Hey, there we go. Yeah, exactly. Appreciate it.
All right, guys, there you have it. Those are the interviews with Coach Lindley. First, the one that Paul and I did in the spring, and then also the post-practice media availability that Coach Lindley did about a week or so ago. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Coach Lindley, is probably taking it year by year. He's a senior offensive analyst this year at San Diego State. He's obviously an Aztec for life. Hearing him talk about, he just wanted to be a part of this. He didn't want to be dead weight. As he said, told us that he told Coach Lewis that he wanted to be, if he was going to stay here for this season in some capacity, he wanted to add value to the group. And obviously you could hear that he is doing that. You could hear from the other coaches that talk about what he has brought to the table. And obviously he's a former Aztec, a quarterback. He played in the NFL. He has that recognition out there, not just in San Diego, but around the, West Coast community, football community on the West Coast. He spent time in the SEC at Mississippi State. So having him around, I think, is a big value to Coach Lewis. And, that those benefits have been seen and could continue to be seen. That's going to do it for us. As I said, we're about 2 weeks away from the opening game. Paul put out an article previewing the offense based on some quotes from offensive line coach Mike Schmidt. So if you have not checked that out, please do so. Johnny Olivieri has also put out some articles recently. I wrote a recap of FanFest, so if you have not had a chance to read any of those articles, go to eastvillagetimes.com and check them out. Otherwise, we appreciate you guys for tuning in and listening, liking, sharing, subscribing, following on all your favorite platforms, and we will talk to you next time. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison.